Welcome to the Wonder of Stuff podcast, covering science, engineering and technology. From atoms to Android, zirconium to zoology, we'll cover it all here. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Wonder of Stuff podcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend, mostly Sunday now. This is the place where you'll find news, information and commentary on science, engineering and technology stuff from the past week and beyond, and anything else that interests us from our tiny human brains. My name is John Gardner, and to help me out on the journey to knowledge, we have one person. We have Ross Davidson. Say hello, Ross.
Hello.
Yes, Richard's delayed this evening. He's hoping to join us in about 15-20 minutes, something like that. So let's see if we've got our cosy 5 minutes of material that will last out that long. So anyway, without further ado, we will start off with one of Ross's topics, and it's something that's been in the news this week. It's been on mass media, and it's about the news. Well, it's the latest smart televisions from Samsung, and how they could be spying on you.
Yes, yeah. So just to give a bit of context, so what I thought I'd start talking about is a bloke called George Orwell, who wrote a book in 1949 called 1984. Now, the subject of this book was it was a dystopian future where there was mass coverage from the government and, surveillance and all this sort of thing. And if you believe the recent media, we're now living in this future. So we're living in this Orwellian future where everything's listened to and recorded and watched. And the reason for this is, like you say, to do with Samsung. And what it was a website pointed out a sentence in Samsung's privacy policy to do with their smart TVs. Now, this sentence basically read, "Please be aware that if your spoken words include personal or other sensitive information, that information will be among the data captured and transmitted to a third party." Now, obviously, the media went mental with this, and we got loads of stories about anything you say when you're sitting in front of your telly. It's going to be like a live version of Gogglebox. They'll know everything you're talking about, and Now, this interests me because it's something that's come up several times before in terms of technology. And this discovery of this sentence in the privacy policy seemed to be a surprise to a lot of people. Now, it shouldn't have been a surprise. Looking into it further, this third party that Samsung mentioned is actually a company called Nuance. Now, this company specializes in speech recognition. So basically, what it is if you turn on the speech recognition part of your television, your speech gets sent to a speech recognition company. So it's sort of the point of the functionality. Now, we have lots of things like Google Voice, Siri on Apple phones that do the same sort of thing. And some of the articles were saying things like, if you disagree with this privacy policy, some of the functionality on your telly won't work. Now, obviously, the speech recognition part would be that bit of functionality. And Samsung actually had to release a clarification a few days ago, this week actually, explaining that the feature has to be enabled. So basically, it doesn't sit there listening to everything you're saying in your front room. You press a button that says, "Listen to what I'm saying," and then it listens and sends you data. So while there's this sort of like massive piece of news about your privacy being invaded, those bits of news that basically saying these things are being put in our homes, and it's like, no, they're not. You're going and buying them and bringing them into your home and then plugging them in the internet and then pressing a button to say, "Listen to me." It just always amazes me that this technology, it's same with Google Mail. People say Google are reading your email, but it's like, yeah, because they have to index it to allow you to search it. So my sort of like, what I see out of this is that people need to be educated more. It's not a massive invasion of your privacy. You just need to know what you're doing, know what you're giving away. Use Google products. You're giving away your search preferences, what you're typing in.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I saw this story come out on the mainstream media, and I don't know who broke it first. I certainly heard it on the BBC, and but to be fair to the BBC, I think it was Rory Coughlan-Jones, their technology editor, who
he's usually quite good.
Yeah, he is pretty good, and he says, well, it's not like that, and he basically just explained what you explained, and what I thought would be the case in any case. Mm-hmm. I think Samsung didn't do themselves any favors with that. It was all written in legalese. I mean, they should be specific. They should say, Well,
the interesting thing was when I was just having a quick look at this to get the snippet from the privacy policy, I took that bit I read is actually how it was put in all the articles. But I did think I'll go to have a look at the actual privacy policy, and that bit actually stops just before the end of the sentence in the actual policy. So when it says transmitted to a third party, that's where everyone stops reporting. In the privacy policy, it actually says for voice recognition, and that's the end of the sentence. And they handily missed that bit off.
Yeah, I mean, that would just make a very good story. Otherwise, does it?
Well,
I mean,
exactly, yeah. I mean, there are obviously sometimes issues. I think there was an issue with LG, their smart TV, which there's you can disagree with the sharing your data. Yet they were still tracking it, and this was to give recommendations to watch. They were still tracking what programs you watched. So there is a story there in that sometimes companies aren't very good at doing what they say they're supposed to do, and then it's sort of like, if they can't do that, what else are they doing with your data? I just feel the way this one was reported, they were making a big deal out of not much.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like a classic Daily Mail type story, where they're all listening into you, they've got your bank account details because you said it to your wife, and it was fairly obvious that there was a technical reason why that was happening. I like you say though, I think that the people, the lawyers who get to write these things and normally come far removed from what's actually happening. The techie guys will be saying, "Oh, we've got this cool thing." Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, that's really cool. Let's do it. It's the same with Google. I mean, when they were doing their original streetcar,
mm-hmm.
Street View, around the country, and they would have that, that little Astra going up and down everywhere, or the many Astras with the little 360-degree camera on the top, but they found as well that they were actually taking snippets of Wi-Fi information, but not because they didn't care about the data. It was just because they thought that to hone in on it in a specific place, it would be better that, as well as all the other information they've got geographically, we know the Wi-Fi access and all that sort of stuff. It was a techie reason. It was a reason. Now, many people say that that they should know better. They're a big company. They should know how to deal with this stuff. Well, I work for a big company. Good cry. The fact that most of the time they don't know their arse from their elbow. So obviously I haven't said who my big company is, but so I just think I do think yes, there should be a bit more specific. But like you said, in that particular case, they were specific.
Well, I think this is the thing. I think because they were specific, that sort of caused it, because people have read it and went, "Oh, really?" And it's like, well, yeah, obviously. And like I say, it's
like you say, somebody read it and somebody didn't read the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing how things out of context sound more dramatic than they actually are.
Exactly. And I mean, it's going to be something that people need to. I think people generally need to know more about how things work. Like I say, the fact that they're saying, whichever article it was saying if you don't agree with this and you turn it off, your TV won't work. And it's like, well, obviously. I think people need to know, if you're going to have this, intelligent, for want of a better word, functionality, it's not going to happen locally. You're not going to have that built into your telly. It's going to be some server somewhere in some big server farm with massive computing that does the voice recognition or the recommendations and stuff. And if you plug your device into the internet, or you have it on 3G on your phone, this is how it's going to work.
Yeah, it's true, and I mean, anything that you plug an internet connection in now, the chances are, data will go somewhere for whatever reason. But mostly it's benign.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly there's a technical reason behind it. But yeah, I guess you could say that we're so far, it's what I would call a mature technology, and the fact is that it's not just like, well, we didn't know because we've been playing around with it. By now, they should have a handle on it. The whole corporation should have a handle on it, and how to and should know how to handle data securely, and all the legislation that goes with it. So I kind of, I think for somebody who's reasonably technically minded and reasonably astute, we could probably read between the lines and know why it's doing it. But why don't they be specific? Why don't they say, well, like you say, snippets of your conversations may be picked up and sent to a third party who will use this to, process on voice recognition. Be a bit more specific rather than generic and woolly.
Yeah, and that was that clarification that's on the Samsung website, where it's saying, they've had to say, it doesn't just sit there listening to you. You have to press the button marked activate listening or whatever it's marked. Obviously, if they put that in the first place, this would have been prevented. But then why do they need to clarify the functionality they're selling? That's the shame, really, that it's not.
Yeah, but people are jittery. In the 21st century, people are jittery about loads of things, and this is just an extra thing for them to be jittery about for no apparent reason. But even when I heard the tail end of the story, and I wasn't paying attention to it, when I heard it originally, I went, really? And then
exactly, you sort of think that can't be right, can it? And then you look at it and you're like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I see Richard has joined us. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
How have you got anything to say on the matter about this wonderful Samsung spy in the living room?
I was actually listening to reactions on it on another podcast that I listened to. Two guys that do that, and they were doing the story on it. All three of us probably, it's safe to say, don't go in for the conspiracy theories. I guess the only concern that you can sort of think of is sort of data harvesting in the future for advertising and building a profile of you in the future, perhaps, maybe even in the distant future. Is that information? Once that information's there, is it indelible? Then could it be retrieved for something in the future? Obviously, nothing as sinister as some people are suggesting, but maybe something like to build up. People talk about now that everyone has a footprint that's being tracked for marketing purposes, and so I guess you could be concerned a little bit about that. Not so much that the TV is going to capture, like Ross is saying, it's not going to capture stuff like your bank details has got nothing to do with that, but just what your preferences on the TV, you're only giving it that information to select the channel. Is that information being harvested to sell you stuff, focused sort of selling in the future? I guess that's a legitimate concern, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the LG one, which was last year, which was I think a more, not really serious, but a more real issue was they were tracking what you were watching, but they actually kept it tracking when you disabled the functionality, and that was wrong, obviously.
Yeah, that's that. Well, I'm tempted to say that's sneaky, but I think that may just been a bug.
Possibly.
You never can tell. It's like it's never been particularly tested because that's the last thing what the developers want to test because it's boring shit.
I guess if the capability's there, the concern from the consumers, some consumers, is going to be there, isn't it? That it could, it almost sounds conspiracy theorist to say it, but you know what I mean. If something can be switched on, there is the potential there that it could be used for its unintended purpose.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I mean, again, you sort of think of the typical argument with this as well. If that worries you, don't buy a smart TV. Just buy a normal TV. And I know obviously they're going to get more and more tellies that are smart, and I suspect there'll be some. I don't know if there are any now. There probably will be some that won't even turn on unless you got them plugged in the internet or something.
Yeah.
But there was the thing about the Xbox when it first came out, the last Xbox, where they were saying that had to be connected to the internet, and everyone went mad about that because it had a camera which had to be turned on, and that turned out to be incorrect. I can understand why with a games console they say it should always be on the internet, because obviously it means they can update stuff and make sure everyone's using the updated software. But having it always on camera was wrong. It turned out.
I mean, I remember going way back when I had a Skybox, and I had to plug it. That was part of the condition of the contract, was you had to plug it into the wall and your phone line constantly.
Yeah,
and that was
make sure you weren't using a dodgy card.
Well, they said that it could be anything. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it was fairly benign. But at the time, I had, it really didn't bother me. But it's funny what you were saying about that everybody's leaving footprints around now. I was actually having a chat with somebody whose brother is leading a startup company who is doing a lot of this. Well, I don't know whether they're data mining, but they're pulling together aggregations of what you've been doing on the internet, and I don't know how they're doing this. I never got any further down the road than that. But I was just saying that if they do things like mine, I mean, if you just search for my email address, jeg1972@gmail.com, or jeg1972, because that's what I use most of the time when I'm logging onto forums and stuff. It'd be quite interesting if you're doing aggregation on stuff like that, because for most of the stuff you will see that I'm logged on to all sorts of open source forums, regularly posting stuff and answering questions and asking questions. But there's also somebody else in America, seems to be in America, who's also got a Jeg1972 handle, and he's into all sorts of
dodgy.
Well, just let's say less nice and fluffy things. Now, if you aggregate all that together in a very simplistic algorithm, I am John Gardner, who's into open source and killing people. So for stuff like that, you've got to be a bit wary. But all my stuff is readily out there. I mean, if somebody wanted to see what I was doing, it's fairly easy to track what I've been doing since about 1999, I think, probably. But the whole thing's interesting, and I think people just have to be large corporations in specifically, and I think they have less of grounds to be a little bit woolly about these things. They have high-powered lawyers. They have all this stuff. You need to be transparent. And if you're upfront and transparent about these things, it's less of a problem. Less people will worry. There'll still be people who Daily Mail readers, and I don't know why am I picking the Daily Mail readers? I don't know why. Anyway, but those type of people will always be. There's always something wrong. They always have a chip on their shoulder, and they all have a beef, and this will be another thing of that. But they really, in other words, big corporations need to get their shit together with security of the data and transparency. That's all I have to say on the matter. I shall just get down off my soapbox now.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like I say, the more and more things, we've touched on the Internet of Things before. More and more things are going to be online and reporting data, and people need to be more aware of the things that they're plugging in their home. And like I say, we're probably more aware of what the data is, why it's doing it, and we'll be quite happy to have whatever we have plugged in. But people will not even think about it. That's the other thing. They'll have things and they'll just plug them straight in. So.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Right. Well, I mean, shall we? I think that's about a good time to finish that one. I think we'll pop on to the next one. Now, the next one is one of mine, and this is the first time I've ever done a topic on genetics. And Richard is here. I hope he wasn't be here to pick me up on the inaccuracies in this, but never mind. I'll be pilloried later. Never mind. So anyway, I think most people, and the men or women in the street would agree. Apart from the creationists, obviously, we'll put those to the side, would agree that evolution exists and is a fact now. We've been through an entire whole of the 20th century. I think it's fair to say even though it's a theory, it's pretty much fact now. We know this is an organism's features, makeups alter and makeup alters over many years to cope with a change in environment or a change in predators. They might have started out on one tectonic plate. This tectonic plate drifted. They ended up somewhere else in a different climate with different things that wanted to kill it. So things changed. We know that. It's also fairly safe to think, I believe, that genetics is at the core of all this change over these many years. But it does appear now that certain creatures can adapt and change much quicker to their environment than we previously thought. Now, before I launch into the whole thing, just to get the facts straight, I think it's probably good if I went through the two things that I'm going to be discussing within this research project. First one's DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, which is the top level plan that any organism must follow to exist. It's the map, it's the blueprint. And it's also a pretty stable way of getting genetic information passed down over the medium and long term. And then there's something else which is just ribonucleic acid, RNA. Now the RNA kind of does the work on behalf of the DNA. So the DNA is the top level big kahuna, and the RNA does the work. And to do that, it transfers bits of the DNA code that's needed to do the job. And most of this job will be creating proteins, which are the basis for the cells. Now, what two universities, University of Tel Aviv and the University of Puerto Rico, they've been doing a long-term research on this, and on a squid, actually. And what they found is that the squid may be able to alter its RNA on the fly. So what happens is, DNA is the top level, the RNA picks the bits of the DNA that it needs and creates the cell, the proteins for the cell. Now, it may be that when it picks the bits of the DNA, it can actually, I don't want to say make decisions, but it can influence how the proteins are being made based on some real-time information, on the fly information. So that when the proteins are made, it may not have been an exact match to the DNA, the top level DNA. Now, they suspected that things like this were going on, but the DNA of a squid has never been sequenced before, or squids or octopods as well. Never been sequenced, so they could never confirm it. They have done a sequence of a fruit fly, and they've confirmed that there was a very, very small change between the DNA and the RNA. It was about 3%. But like I say, this university project, this joint university project between Israel and Puerto Rico, what they found is there's a 60% change. There's a 60% difference between the RNA and the DNA, the actual start and the end point. And basically, if no changes were being made between the DNA and the RNA, they would be exactly the same. So every time they got a change, they found a change between the DNA and the RNA, they marked it as an edit, and there was a 60% change from the initial DNA plan to the RNA. So what do you think of that?
Incredible.
That's pretty amazing. So this is like sort of real-time evolution. It's like this reaction to what were they changing? Or was this just the fact that it changed between the RNA and the DNA? Yeah,
well, the thing is that the squid, when the squid moves around into the different environments, and obviously the cells recreate this change between the top level DNA plan and what is actually, I guess, the worker bit of it, which is the RNA. It's actually saying, well, yeah, that's great at the top level, but I need to tweak it a little bit before I create this protein, which I think is amazing. Now, the first thing that I did when I did a bit of research on this, and I thought, well, what they're going to ask me is when they say, because it said things like on the fly and immediate, but I can't actually say how quickly this is happening. All I can say is it's much quicker than the thousands of years it would go to change normally under DNA.
In the organism's lifetime, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's it.
So it's not evolution, because obviously evolution would be passing that change down.
Well, yeah.
Well, unless some of that change is then expressed, unless that RNA is then feeds back into the DNA, I suppose. But I guess
that.
What adaptations are these then? I guess it's something very fundamental like temperature and things like that, is it? Or
yeah, I think it was non-specific about what environmental changes, but that it was just saying it was an environmental change.
60% is quite a significant.
Yeah, that does seem like
changing from a squid into a orangutan.
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like a huge percentage change.
Well,
are they sure they picked up the same animal?
They
didn't just pick the wrong animal by mistake.
They said that when they did it with a fruit fly, there was only a 3% change.
Yeah.
Because obviously the fruit fly was one of the first things that had the full DNA sequenced.
I mean, even that, I remember one of the first studies on this subject that I can remember was when because obviously everything has a common language, like you've alluded to. RNA and DNA is universal for all organisms on Earth. We don't know if that'll be the case elsewhere, which is an interesting question in itself. But on Earth, and one of the first genetic experiments, I believe, was where they got the the gene for human eye, and they actually transplanted that onto a fly, and very eerily the fly grew a fly's eye on its leg, so it grew its own eye on its leg by inserting that code almost.
Now we already know flies have really bloody complicated eyes. So you would really know where it's going and see out of its backside.
I don't know if it was functional, of course, probably not.
What's the point of having an eye on your leg if it's not functional?
But just interesting that how, even though the fly probably naturally only makes use of 3% change, you could very easily manipulate the fly to probably do 60% if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus is the reason why they think that the squid has this big change is because they've got a really hyper complex central nervous system, which isn't, there's no real other than in primates. I guess there's no real other organism that's got like that, or that they've done a genome sequence on that has got that highly complex, highly evolved central nervous system, and they're thinking that might have something to do with it. But
have they looked at
vertebrae, surely?
Well, yes, possibly, yes.
Are they looking into this in humans to see if this sort of thing happens in humans?
Well, I mean, I think what they're going to do is they're going to do it on other organisms first, non-human animals. But I think what they're hoping is that if this shows promise in other creatures, that the next step is obviously that trying to treat some human diseases that we've got with this. If we can actually change things. Now, but interesting question. There's nothing in any of these research papers that actually says what Richard said there was, once it's changed, once that little bit of change has it gone back into the central DNA, and does that pass down the lineage? Yeah. Well, I don't think it does. I think it's just like a real-time sort of tweaking system.
Yeah, it's like the RNA is like, I think the analogy is it's like the operating system, basically. So changes you make to that don't make changes to the hardware, to continue the analogy, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
But that is the first sort of. I know it's not real in evolution story. It's a genetic changing story.
It's amazing. I mean, the not just humans, but not just human health, but also, I guess, for our food shortages. If we already do some genetic modification to crops. Of course, we all know about that. But presumably, if you can do these sort of RNA changes on livestock and food plants in that way, then that probably has some interesting implications as well, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's
changing a single generation.
Yeah, I mean, if this can be reproduced, I mean, there is a possibility that this was a one-off, and this was not. But if it can be reproduced in different creatures, then this could be a huge breakthrough. But I mean, I don't often do genetic stories, but this was a real. When I saw this, it was a real eye opener.
They're very interesting. That
I hadn't seen it, so I'm very glad that you've drawn my attention to it.
Well, I shall put it on the show notes, Richard, on this wonderful new blog that we've got, which is in salmon, not pink. I mean, actually, Richard's been putting loads of stuff on there. He's been clearing a few things that we'd said in previous vodcasts and been adding little bits of extra information on. So, but I dare say you won't have much time to do that starting Monday.
I think I'll still find the time. I mean,
Richard's got a new job.
Yeah, when I was writing up my notes for the topic tonight, I just thought, I'll write it in the format that it's going to go on the blog anyway, rather than doing two separate tasks.
Ah, clever. It's all up there for thinking, down there for dancing.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, fortuitous, timing-wise, it's yours, Richard. And now, this may be a reason where I can go back to my wife and say, no, you're not multitasking. This one. I believe it is. You're talking about multitasking, but you're talking about whether humans can multitask.
Yeah, well, I had said to you originally that I was going to say that it's bad for us, and then changed it to can we? And really, it could be about both. So I'll give it a bit context. Obviously, we live in an age where most office jobs, at least, require constant checking of emails, and when we're at home, text message notifications demand instant attention. You've got social media demanding instant attention. So it's kind of just a phenomenon now of modern life, at work and at home, that you're expected to, be able to cope with lots of distractions. And the way that we say that we cope with that is to multitask, where we think we're doing several things at once. But it turns out from the neuroscience, what we're actually doing is rapidly switching from one task to another. Which I guess you could argue is a form of multitasking, but the point is that they're not simultaneously occurring.
So you're time slicing, especially to use a computer analogy.
Yeah, which I guess comes as no surprise really when you think about it, but the implications of this are quite interesting. So this idea traces all the way back to the 50s. An experiment at McGill University, which I think we've mentioned before. Them there's lots of interesting experiments there. But this was when they discovered the reward center in the brain, which I'm sure that you know about this dopamine and where you get positive reinforcement for a task completion. But this was an experiment on rats, and the paper. Well, basically, what the experiment was, they rigged the rats up, their prefrontal cortex. They rigged them up to get an electrical stimulation. That would be the same as if they had a natural physical reward. And basically, the rats pressed a lever, and they received this stimulation. And they found that the rats were very driven by this, more so than previous experiments where there had been natural rewards. So the inference in the paper was that this in itself was a sort of a self-reinforcing system, and I think that the rats would actually, if you continued the experiment, go without food and water and just continue pressing this lever. It was that strong of a reinforcing mechanism. And of course, we're like rats. We've got the same septal region in the brain. We've got the same thing as rats. So when we reply to an email or check our Twitter feeds to get some new information, this is the region that you get a reward from. So this is why it feels as though you're achieving something. And the part of the brain is biased towards novelty. It's biased for evolutionary good reasons. It rewards you more for new things. So that's why checking a Twitter feed feels rewarding in that sense. And this is the dopamine feedback loop. So in the same way as it did for the rats, it's the same for you. But this causes you to lose focus because you're searching for that external stimulation. It sort of brings to mind Homer Simpson. He's very easily distracted. He has these thoughts. But yeah, since then there's been research into the multitasking thing, saying that it increases the production of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Adrenaline, which puts you into flight or fight mode. So it can be very addictive, but it overstimulates the brain. It makes it very difficult to hold on to a thought. So it's actually counterproductive to try and multitask in this way, and shifting your attention rapidly. But it gets worse. Basically, the glucose store that your brain uses to do these tasks is also used up very rapidly by switching tasks. So that's the reason you'll have had this sensation of, if you do a lot of things close together and, as people call it, multitasking, you can get like a sort of mental fog where you just can't take in any new information. And that's basically why it literally depletes the energy stores that your brain's using to focus on a task. So you'd be much better off focusing on a single task and trying to complete it in serial. And there's all sorts of productivity tests as well, studies. And it just simply does not make you more efficient. Every single study that's been done on this, it makes you less efficient. So basically, to sum up, multitasking is an illusion, and there's plenty of reasons why we should steer well clear.
And that is always what I've said to my wife. I'd rather do one thing well than multi things very badly.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think from my point of view as well, I do when I'm doing something at work, and it as part of a manager, one of the things is that you have to be available to everybody in your team. So what you have is, I'm trying to do something, so I'm concentrating on something, and somebody comes up to you and goes, about some other stuff that's going on. They don't announce what it's about. They just automatically they think that you know what they're talking about. And I find it very hard to pull myself away of what I'm engrossed in. So, and
then you have to start again when you go back.
Yeah, from that point of view, it was like, what I've started to say was, can you just wait 10 minutes? And then I'll get back to you. But it means that I can actually finish a job and have full single tasking on it. And then I don't have to do all this, multiple channels of information coming from all over the place to try and distract me and all that stuff.
I mean, in terms of the question, can we multitask? I mean, we can multitask, but obviously it has to be on different levels of tasks. If you think of something like a sort of a more physical task, driving a car or something, you can sort of go into autopilot. So you must be able to. I mean, obviously that's probably not a good idea, which is why you shouldn't talk on your phone while you're driving, because if you're on autopilot, you're not giving it your full attention. But there are certain things you can do by just sort of putting them to one side. And I don't think that would be time slicing, would it? Would that not be sort of running on a lower level?
The evidence suggests, though, that you can think of it as a finite bandwidth that your brain has, to keep the computer analogy going, and that driving has been one of these that's been studied. And if you try and do a maths equation while you drive, you become worse at driving. I mean, something has to give. So yes, in a sense, but you're not multitasking in the sense of two processors at each task. You have to divide the compute time up because the brain simply works in parallel.
It sort of feels to me like that would be slightly different to the time slicing thing. The idea of doing two sort of equal tasks, I suppose it's probably just like you say, the fact that if you're dedicating an equal amount of brain power to them, it becomes more of a rapid switching, whereas if it's lower,
Yeah. The thing is that you're not actually doing them though both at the same time. You feel as though you are, but you're just very, very, very rapidly switching between two things. So yeah, of course, all your unconscious behavior, like I say, if it's truly an unconscious thing, then
that's what I'm thinking. If you can sort of do it without having to think about it.
Yeah. If you can do it without having to think about it, that's different. But I mean, driving, you would have to think about at some level, even though it feels very natural and it feels sort of like you're on autopilot, like you say. But I think that in itself is an illusion. You are on task, and some of what I've been reading about to research this as well. is suggesting that to take a break, well, basically there's very few jobs that are genuinely multitasking. The classic example is air traffic controller, but it's common practice there that they work for an hour and then have a 20-minute break, and in those break times they're not allowed to like watch telly or use devices or because that doesn't count as switching off. So reading a book's an interesting one. That kind of straddles a line because your mind's allowed to wander when you do that. But generally TV is kind of engrossing, so you don't actually switch off. So I guess it depends on the type of activity. Some things you can sort of get away with it, but I think broadly it is just an illusion that you're multitasking. You're actually just very, very rapidly switching from one to another, and that switching itself is exhausting your ability to stay on a task. So
I've had that situation before where you've got two things to do, and you actually find yourself switching between them, and then you end up spending about half an hour on both of them and realizing I'm not getting anywhere with these, and you literally have to force yourself to think, right, let's just concentrate on one for now, otherwise you sort of get into that blocking thing where you sort of, as soon as you start doing this task, you're thinking about that one, and vice versa. So sometimes you do get a sort of a very apparent example of when you should just do them in series and get rid of the one first, then concentrate on another.
That exact phenomenon has been observed as well, and it's even worse than you say. They did an experiment where people were just made aware that they had an unread email, and you lose functionally 10 IQ, functional IQ points. But you know the sort of working IQ. You lose 10 points with just by knowing that there's an email unread. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's true. It's true. It's exactly what I have. Yeah. I might be doing something else, but as soon as I get the little tooltip that comes up in the bottom of the screen saying you have new mail, I'm thinking what the mail is. I'm not concentrating on that at all, and that's why there's lots of companies who you have like a no email day or for that very reason.
That's certainly
I think emails should be scheduled. You only get them every hour or something.
There's all sorts of suggestions on that, and also big companies like Google and stuff have got nap rooms now, where people are encouraged when they're working on a problem to take a 15-minute nap. Of course, we've talked about sleep before. It's sort of like that's, if you want another computer analogy, it's like defragging. You know, when you have a sleep, it's the saying of sleep on it and then make the decision is true. You know, it does. That's backed up now. That if you sleep on it, sort of you're much clearer, and it's because of this glucose. These stores are depleted as you're doing tasks, and if you take a good rest from them, these stores are back to full, and you can make a good decision. But here's another interesting one for you. Because the neurons are cells, they're taking. So when you make a decision, no matter how trivial it is, the cell doesn't care. So if you make a series of very trivial decisions, they could be very, very, not even realizing that it's a decision. Just should I check my Twitter feed or not is a decision. So if you make a series of those decisions, and then you come to make an important one, you're actually impaired. Your ability to make that decision is impaired because that fuel has literally been used up. So you make, and this has been studied as well, you make a worse decision. By your own admission or by some objective measure, you make a worse decision after you've made a series of insignificant decisions beforehand. So even multitasking and quick, in that way, is still not good for you either.
So would the best thing to do just never make a decision unless it's important?
Well, it's just about prioritization, isn't it? And trying to keep...
No, I think you'd find that the moral to that story is if you're the President of the United States, you don't read your Twitter feed before you're about to press the button for thermonuclear attack.
But you're fighting...
That might be the wrong one.
You're fighting an uphill battle, both against your own body, who's rewarding you for multitasking, by making you feel good about making these minor decisions. And it's no good because these are tasks that weren't on your to-do list that have just occurred, but yet you feel as though you've achieved something. You weren't even aware of the existence of the task until it came into your mind. So you're not achieving anything really, but you're getting rewarded for it. And it seems as though the modern world we live in, this is becoming a more and more. We've had it in the past. I'm not saying this is a completely new phenomenon, but it seems to me and to others that this is sort of the time we live in now. There's many more distractions, and there's a lot more focus in your place of work on this. You hear it in job descriptions. I'm sure you'll have come across it saying, that people want good multitaskers. I've come across bosses who want that, who want you to multitask, and you're sort of tempted to say, well, it's fictitious, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you raised that in an interview, you'll still not have the job. Actually, I think you'll find that's an incorrect assumption. You can't actually multitask. B, it is very bad for you. Yes, there's the door. But it is true, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, because that is the way I work anyway. But I get the feeling that I am, when I say, please, I'm trying to concentrate on this, I will come over to you and deal with your point later on. I get the feeling it's like, but then, I have the scientific proof to say that I am in the right.
It's always nice to have your feeling about something confirmed with the evidence, isn't it? I guess there's just, for us, we're of that opinion, but there's just as many people of the opposite opinion who really trust the sort of feedback they're getting, and why wouldn't they? If they're getting rewarded with dopamine all the time, and their body is creating the illusion, just as alcohol creates the illusion. If you mark your attractiveness after a few glasses of alcohol, it goes up how attractive you think you are. If the brain is really good at creating all sorts of illusions, and they're because of either external factors or internal factors. It doesn't really make a difference. The brain is excellent.
Is that like mirrored beer goggles?
Yeah. Well, yeah. You not only do make other people more attractive, but you also yourself. But after alcohol that you think you're stronger and a better fighter, and it creates all these illusions, doesn't it? But the chemical is just tricking the brain into thinking that, and in the same way, when you're getting dopamine and adrenaline and what have you, you're tricking yourself into thinking, wow, I've achieved a lot here, because you're getting a reward for it. And the rats took it to the extent that they were willing just to, sort of stop all other duties and just press this lever until they starved to death, which is quite incredible.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that is a good place to leave it for this episode. We've hit our we're over the 45 minutes mark. We're into the 50-minute mark now. So yet another great episode. And if again, I'll ask my plaintive cry at the end of every episode. If you've got any information, or if you have any questions you'd wish to ask us, you can email us on wonderofstuff@gmail.com, or go to the URL for wonderofstuff.blogspot.co.uk or blogspot.com. I think it works as well. And Richard has, like I say, he's been populating, and I'll be putting some more on this week. Hopefully, Ross will be getting around to doing some at some point. But we desperately would like to hear from you if you're listening and watching us, and if you've got any questions to ask us, or if you want questions to discuss in the actual episode, please feel free. Anyway, that is all from me, and thank you very much, Richard.
No bother.
Thank you very much, Ross.
No bother.
And we will see you same time, same bat channel next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.